Good morning. Good morning. Aloha, I guess we would say in Hawaii. While we pull up the briefing, I would ask you to think back 50 years ago when Neil Armstrong set his foot on the moon and took one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. The world was a simpler place, all right? Space was a simpler place. We had the great power competition going on between the US and the Soviet Union, of course, and we competed in space as in every domain at that time, and it was indeed a very exciting time to be in space. However, I would offer to you that we are entering a second space age and a second extremely exciting time to be in space. Let's have a show of hands, though. Who was around in 1969? All right, that's about what I expected, about half the audience. So we will have to help explain to the younger folks what it was like in 1969, and we can look for parallels and we can look for differences as we move forward. So in the mid-20th century, the U.S. and USSR raced to space, and space was relatively simple. Today, it's much more complex, and in fact, it's being driven by some completely different forces. So let me tell you why I think this is such an exciting and dynamic time in space. What I'm seeing as a leader of the science and technology community in our enterprise, what I'm seeing is the convergence of the art of the possible, the technology that's enabling us to do new things in space, with a sense of urgency. On the technology side of things, what I see is just dramatically increasing capabilities at dramatically lower price points. The cost of launch is down by a factor of 4 for small sats at least. SpaceX advertising $5,000 a kilogram, almost unthinkable to get to LEO orbit. On the small sat components, things are down by a factor of 10 and with much higher performance than what we've ever had before. So from the art of the possible perspective, it has enabled all kinds of architectures and economic opportunities that were never possible before, and that's opened up all these new architectures and these new possibilities. But then that's not enough by itself. All right, there's also this sense of urgency. And the sense of urgency, if you're a commercial player, comes from profit opportunity. There are business opportunities in space that didn't exist before, especially in these proliferated LEO orbits, that folks are going after, and it's great. That competition is what makes our country and our capitalist world so powerful and so innovative, and we're seeing it play out in space right now. On the government side, we also have a sense of urgency in it. The sense of urgency comes from concern about our peer adversaries, and as laid out in the National Defense Strategy, as space as a war-fighting domain, and we don't want to have a war that extends into space. So that means we need to be able to deter war in space, and we have a sense of urgency to build the capabilities that our nation and our world needs in order to do that. So you take the technology and the sense of urgency, whether you're commercial or government, you put those together, and that's what we're seeing, and that's why I call this the second space age. We've got 10 times as many objects up there, so from a space situational awareness perspective, you can certainly see some challenges. We also have a number of other challenges in space, some familiar, some new. Certainly, that space has never been a friendly environment in which to operate, and now we've got potential enemy threats that are up there that we need to think about as well. So those challenges have been around for a long time, and they are still here, and we need to think about them. Some challenges are a little more nuanced. All right, clearly the future in space requires both cooperation and competition, requires working with partners and allies, requires working with commercial folks. It's a much more complex problem that we're working towards today, and it requires a whole of government approach, and it's not just a military approach to address some of the problems that and challenges and opportunities that we're facing in space today. So that's why it's so exciting, and that's why we're entering the second space age. Now, if you think it's challenging today, just look ahead till 2030. All right, here I've shown you some of the commercial players and what they plan to build up there. And really, we expect our projections show that not only will we have 100 times more objects that we need to track up there, by 2030, they will be much smaller, down CubeSat-sized type things. We have no idea how many humans will be up there, but that'll complicate the safety factors. We don't know how many nations will be playing, or how big of a factor nation states will be as compared to the commercial providers that are up there. So there's a lot of unknowns, a lot of opportunities, and a lot of challenges in this second space age. Now, let me take you a little bit deeper into the lower right corner there that talks about the whole cislunar sphere. All right, right now, most of our space situational awareness activities are focused on where the satellites are, mostly in LEO and GEO. And we certainly do not have those challenges solved by any means. However, what we now need to start thinking about is how are we going to perform space situational awareness, or space domain awareness, as we're starting to call it, in the entire cislunar sphere. There's a number of challenges in that endeavor. First of all, the moon is at 10 times geo-orbit. So we are talking about, just in terms of sheer volume, 10 to the third, 1,000 times as much volume as needs to be surveilled to find objects up there. And much greater distances from the Earth, at least, that need to be surveilled. So it's just a scaling problem in some ways. Certainly the moon is also a gravitational force that is not negligible in this environment. So simple two-line element set and Keplerian astrodynamics, not sufficient to characterize this environment. We need to move beyond that. Ground and Earth-based SSA sensors cannot see most objects against the moon. And I show that in the lower right there, where perhaps the large ground-based telescopes can cover the green area, but as far as the red area, we probably will need some space-based assets. Now, the area is also particularly interesting because of the low energy required for orbit transfer once you get above geo. So it takes a fair amount of energy to get up to geo, but then the amount of energy required to get from geo to the moon, not very much. I show some examples up there, and then certainly you can zip around, at least from an energy perspective, between L1, L2, L4, L5, all of these points. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean you're zipping around in a speed perspective, because we're talking about a lot of distance here. And so the red arrows reflect that it might take you 16 days, for example, to get from L1 to L2, but it's only going to take you 0.2 kilometers per second of delta V. Now, we are in AFRL, we are now building satellites and designing satellites that have thousands of meters per second of delta V. So it is not inconceivable that we will be able to move all around through this atmosphere, and that complicates SSA. So the relatively low energy for orbit transfer is both an opportunity for us as we explore this space and use it for commercial and national interests, and a challenge for us in the SSA environment. Now, in the lower left, I am proposing a hypothesis that I would like you to help me prove or disprove, all right? Our hypothesis is that large ground-based telescopes will be able to at least find objects in the cislunar sphere in that green arc that I show there. If you look at the LSST, the SST that are coming online, they will be able to find all objects of interest in that green arc once or twice a week, we expect. All right, so again, I'm throwing this out there as a hypothesis. The red arc, we do not believe the ground-based telescopes will be able to cover the red arc, and we believe some space-based assets will be needed. Big fan of transponders in this environment, all right? An AIS-like transponder on a satellite will make it a heck of a lot easier to identify your own satellite, the other satellites that are up there for traffic management purposes, and perhaps the satellites that don't have transponders on them, as in the maritime domain, may be of extra special interest. So as we move into this regime, do encourage this transponder idea that we already talked about this morning. Radar, maybe not so useful in this regime due to the distances involved, the 1 over r to the 4th scaling of the radar effectiveness. So some just preliminary thoughts. I throw that out there as a hypothesis that I would like you to help us prove or disprove as to whether the ground-based telescopes can cover the green and some space-based assets can cover the red. Whatever data you collect up there, we want to put it into our data lake. All right, and the Unified Data Library is our space situational awareness data lake that is out there. We now have 30 companies putting data in there. If you put your data in there, you control who accesses your data. It is not just an open web where everybody can get to the data. So encourage folks to put their data in here and to expose it to the people to whom you'd like to expose it. This is not the eventual vision for this. The eventual vision for this is that this will be an enabler of a space commodities exchange, where much as you have commodities exchanges in other parts of the economy, space will become a place where you can buy and sell precious metals, minerals mined from space, services such as I would like to look at that space in the sky in the next 10 minutes, who would like to bid on that, all kinds of things that could be done on a space commodities exchange. And this is the enabler and the foundation that we hope will lead to that kind of commercial exchange in the space environment. So the UDL's out there, encourage folks to use it, put your data in there. Putting your data in there will allow us to mine that data, just as we do with advanced data analytics in other domains, and we have a number of efforts underway to do that. So we've been doing a number of space accelerators, as we call them, which is where we bring in small companies and we expose problems to them, and they are allowed to innovate, and we've been getting some great innovation out of this. The next accelerator is going to be looking at SSA data analytics. So the basic idea is we will put that data out there. The folks that are selected to come do this will build their algorithms, build their apps, and show us what can be done with that. So just expose the data to these innovative developers, and we will be able to get some great apps that mine this SSA data, tell us what we need to know in this environment. So a few details there. The pitch day culminating at the end of the accelerator will be there in November, and I expect to get, as with every other accelerator that we've done, some tremendous and rapid innovation out of this event. So now, this Cislunar SSA, just one of many initiatives that we're working on at Air Force Research Lab. We recently, over the past year, completed a strategic planning initiative where, if I could summarize it super quickly, here's the Space Force we need, here's the Space Force we have, here's a bunch of gaps. Some of them are not technology problems, they're just money or funding or something that is not my lane to work on. Some of them are technology problems I'm already working on, and some of them are technology problems I should be working on. This is that third category of the technology problems that are underfunded areas in space science and technology that need some work. And there you are, number 7, Cislunar Space SSA for space domain awareness. So this is part of that initiative. Now, whatever I do in Air Force Research Lab and whatever technology I produce and build, my partner to field that is primarily the Space and Missile Systems Center, and they're going to take these technologies and they're going to put them up into space so we can do some more testing.
Thanks, Eric. So some of the comments we've heard earlier today about the motivation for why we need to change in space and why we need to do it rapidly, SMC has come on board to relook at itself. And under the leadership of General J.T. Thompson, we've put SMC on its side. We've reorganized from what we traditionally had in our mission area stovepipes to what you can see here displayed on the screen. And this is a much more developmentally friendly, sort of milestone-based strategy for how we organize the center. Over to the far left, you see the portfolio architect. Colonel Russ Tehan is the portfolio architect. Looks at, along with the enterprise architect, Mike Dickey at Air Force Space Command, where we want to head in the future. They'll help identify what roadmaps for technology development and prototyping capabilities we want to do to get us to that future. That then comes over to the development core, which is where I'm from, the Innovation and Prototyping Directorate. Many of you may remember the Advanced Systems and Development Directorate, or AD. We've transformed ourselves into innovation and prototyping and actually have expanded our portfolio by quite a bit. I'll have a slide on that shortly. But the development core is focused on developing that sort of Block 1, Block 10 capability that will then transition to a full production system in the production core. By doing that, we're able to take additional risks in some areas and try technologies that may or may not work. Not everything that we develop in the development core will transition to production core, and that's an acknowledgement we start out with up front. From production core, we're working closely with the traditional suppliers to develop those systems and develop those capabilities and those training modules, et cetera, that provide the logistics tail to make it a fully realized capability for the warfighter to use. The enterprise core is everything that helps us exploit the space domain, either through launch to help us get there, or through ground systems that help us operate the systems that are in space. There's the Atlas core that provides the engineering support along the base, sort of holding this all up like Atlas as well. So that just gives you a brief concept of how SMC has reorganized itself to address the challenge that we're facing of the threats and the environment we're in today, as well as to help take advantage of some of the incredible partnerships that are out there through, as Eric mentioned, the commercial industry and their rapid acceleration. So briefly, what we've done within the innovation and prototyping is combine all of those development activities that used to be under SMC across the different 2 letters into one organization. It is the conglomeration of all of the A teams, if you will, under one banner. And you can see some of the examples of capabilities. General Shaw mentioned QZSS earlier. We're leading that effort along with a partnership with special programs who are developing the SSA sensor. Long duration propulsive ESPA. What we call a freight train to space is a building block from what AFRL developed with the Eagle system. The Space Enterprise Consortium, I'll have a few charts later, but it is a other transaction authority, a contractual mechanism to help put things on contract much more rapidly so that we can get prototypes in orbit much more quickly. In all, within the Innovation and Prototyping Directorate, we're currently tracking 54 different prototyping activities. So that's challenging in and of itself, but as you think about that from an SSA perspective, you can also see some of the implications and opportunities for that community. So rather than have a traditional mission statement and vision statement, we went a little bit outside of the box and said, okay, what do? We want to make concepts real. So the portfolio architects are going to have these great ideas of what's going to be in the future for space. We're the ones that actually make that happen. We want to do that to give our warfighters the edge to, as General James mentioned earlier, project that strength so that adversaries will look up into space and say, no, not today. The tenets of SMC 2.0 are categorized as epic speed, enterprise, partnership, innovation, culture, and speed. And you can see how we're trying to reflect that mantra within our organization as well. The cross out of PM and replacement with everyone is just an indication that we truly believe that risk-taking is not done just by the operational community when it comes time to maneuver a satellite or launch a rocket, not just by a program manager to say, yeah, that technology may or may not be ready, but also by the contracting shop, the finance shop, the entire organization that helps make space capabilities come to fruition. So as I mentioned a little bit about Space Enterprise Consortium, you may have seen recently in Space News that this effort has been wildly successful. It was originally set up as a $100 million ceiling. Within about 4 months, we realized that we were going to exceed that within a year, and we got approval from Dr. Roper to increase it to $500 million. And then before that year was up, we realized we're going to break through that, and we're currently working with OSD to extend that ceiling to something on the order of $1.4 billion. The Space Enterprise Consortium currently has over 300 members. We've awarded obviously over $500 million worth of efforts in a variety of mission areas with a variety of mission partners, so we're very excited about that. The plan for the future for Space Enterprise Consortium is to develop a SPEC 2.0, if you will, that's planned to be about $1 billion a year for 10 to 12 years in the future, because we want to keep the innovation that's coming through this other transaction authority going well into the future. So I talked about the freight train to space, and for the long time that was our sole mantra, that the objective here is to launch a platform on an annual basis. You have your ticket, you ride up. If you miss it this time, well, just wait, there'll be another one in a year. And so a lot has been made about that, and I think it's important to note that that's not the only way that we're putting things in orbit today. We also, through our space test program, have partnership with NASA. So we've got a passenger car to space. We're launching things from the ISS. The hosted payload office is alive and well, and we're looking at new ways of better partnering with the commercial world and other partners in industry and internationally to produce hosted payload opportunities. Blackjack and Casino, partnership with DARPA, looking at how we can leverage the large proliferated LEO constellations and host payloads for those. Through the Space Test Program, we've initiated, through the Rapid Agile Launch Initiative, small launch capabilities through a variety of customers, as well as the first the first Falcon Heavy launch for a DoD payload just this past June, which was STP-2. So we're really at the forefront of an all-out blitz to space, and I can say blitz because we're in football season, right? So it's okay. An all-out blitz to the space domain to put capabilities on orbit more rapidly, to put things on orbit that will produce a payload or an opportunity for payloads like SSA systems to perform their operations. So what are the implications for SSA? First, as the last panel mentioned, there's going to be a lot more potential debris, much more objects in space that have to be tracked. And so we're going to need a very robust SSA capability to ensure spaceflight safety, not just for ourselves, but for everybody that operates in that domain. It's also going to be imperative to improve our SSA capabilities for the on-orbit testing that we're going to do via the long-duration propulsive Sejba and other platforms. We need to have that in-situ awareness of those activities so that we can conduct those safely and make sure that they are successful or learn from those events. Additionally, by having opportunities like hosted payloads and the long-duration propulsive Sejba, it creates a plentiful opportunity for us to deploy SSA sensors in a variety of regimes, LEO, GEO, and even cislunar into the future. So what we're looking for from the SSA community is the ability to take payloads from basically off the shelf that have been developed in a low-cost mentality and host them on a variety of platforms, just like we've done with QZSS, hosting an SSA sensor on a Japanese satellite. We want to be able to host SSA sensors on all of the things I mentioned on the previous slide. And we believe that through things like the Space Enterprise Consortium and the Long Duration Pulse VESPA, we're positioned in a great place to make that happen. So as we look forward to the future, I think this is an incredibly dynamic time in space. Obviously, we're at the crossroads of a change in policy, a recognition of the importance of space, as well as an incredible boom within the space industry and in the international community. That has created an opportunity for us to really set a new path for how we exploit the space domain into the future for the security of the nation and all of our allies and partners on the planet. So with that, I've got, I think, 3 minutes and 40 seconds for Eric and I to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Someone's got to ask some tough questions.
Oh. Tough question or a bathroom break. Here we go.
Yes. Sir, Lieutenant Colonel Goldberg from NGA. So you mentioned in one of your slides for SMC 2.0 enabling everybody and empowering everybody to take risk. Do you have any examples of how that has manifested itself so far?
I'm sorry, it was a little congested. Everybody?
Examples of people taking risks.
Examples
everybody
of people
taking risks.
being
Everybody
empowered
taking
to
risks.
take risk.
Yeah, absolutely. So we know that when we're manifesting payloads onto the long-duration propulsive VESPA, we go through a space prototype and review board process. We're taking a risk when we say this is going to get manifested on this platform at this time because not all of them mature at the right rate. And so when we're doing that, we're making an assumption that those are going to be developed on a timely basis. When we're putting up capabilities that may not be triply redundant, for example, we're going to single string. So we are accepting a risk that platform may not be fully successful once it's deployed. But we're not doing it in a haphazard way. We're doing it in a way that's responsible. So if we're doing a first of a kind or in a single string system, we're going to test it out in basically a disposal orbit as opposed to the main operational geo belt, for example. So those are just a couple of the examples of how we're trying to take risk.
Of course, within the lab, we take a lot more risks than within the product centers, as it should be. And when we talk about taking risk, the two things I like to emphasize is, first of all, it's not like cowboy to taking risk. It's very calculated, careful things. But the reason we do that is so that we can go faster and get inside our adversaries' OODA loop and actually produce new technology at the speed at which we need to produce it. We cannot do that on the old pace. And so when I was talking about the sense of urgency, that's something that I've really started to see. And that's why people are now willing to take more risks, because we have to. And so with that element added, I think I've seen a lot more willingness to take calculated risks than what we had, say 4 to 10 years ago. So I've seen a lot of examples both in the product center and the lab.
Yeah. And so even this slide right here, this is the landing of Space Test Program boosters. This was the first reuse of a booster for a DoD payload as well. So those are the sorts of things that help example of us taking risks.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Hey, good morning. It's Colonel Kevin Brisky, retired Air Force from Canada, working with the company North Star Earth and Space in Canada, putting up a constellation of 52 satellites. And I'm just wondering about your connection to the DIU and what Colonel Bucky Buto is doing there with his persistent and indications and warnings line of effort.
So you have DIU connections?
Yeah, many. I mean, the ecosystem is very closely tied together. I work closely with Bucky, and I love a lot of his innovative ideas. He's also got some innovative ideas to go up to the moon and map the lunar surface and things like that. So we talk and collaborate about these ideas all the time, and I think they fit together very nicely. It's in terms of taking risk. I mean, he's really out there in terms of being willing and able to take some risks to develop some really novel, potentially game-changing capabilities at awesome price points. So I love what he's doing, and we do work closely together.
Yeah, and so we're also working with DIU through the casino effort, which is a follow-on to the blackjack effort for proliferated LEO systems. So we've got a couple of efforts on contract through DIU, as well as through SPEC. Okay, the clock has stopped at 4:49, which either means we're in a temporal pause, you can ask all the questions you want, or we just need to stop and move on to the next section. So thank you all. Mahalo.